Less than 24 hours from now, we will have a lot of the answers about Switch 2, and this will be probably the last video that we're talking about this console with a lot of unknowns surrounding it, because I personally am expecting the Switch 2 Direct that will take place tomorrow to absolutely deliver on news, information, stuff you want to know, probably not all of the detailed specs and exactly what the processor is clocked at, and maybe even the resolution of the screen may or may not be revealed at these type of things. Nintendo doesn't tend to get into the nitty gritty with details from the technical side of things, but they are no doubt going to show us the answers to a lot of the speculated upon features. Optical mouse sensors, I'm certain we will know what the C button actually does, but there's a lot of Nintendo Switch 2 news that is dropped in the lead up to this, so we're gonna do this video a little bit different because we have like legitimately 5 to 6 different articles and sources to hop through and get on the same page with everything. So I will have timestamps down below for each individual topic, but to give you a brief overview, we have another thing that could be tied to the C button separate from this separate screen sharing rumor that's going around. You may have seen in yesterday's video where it's claimed that a Switch 1 may be able to connect to the Switch 2 as a secondary controller essentially, and a secondary screen that you have access to, literally Wii U style. We're not visiting that portion, but there is some reason to believe that Nintendo is doing on-system party chat this time around, and we have further details on that. We also have some interesting stories about Nintendo withholding dev kits from major developers, big and small from the sounds of things, citing one for specific reasons, and other ones just kind of lines up with that Tom Henderson report over on Insider Gaming suggesting a 3-phase launch plan for this console. So we're going to briefly retouch on that. Then we have brand new renderings of the Switch 2 directly from Nintendo, also more or less confirming that mouse functionality because they have the Joy-Con literally face down in the mouse orientation, if you will. As well as a very last tidbit story of the new Pokemon game seems to be, or not Legends EA, but rather the new Gen 10 Pokemon games do seem that they will be developed exclusively for Nintendo Switch 2 at this point. So tons to unpack today. Before we get on the same page with all of this, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here, and make sure you do it if you want to keep up to date with all things Switch 2, because literally the amount of news that's going to be coming your way out of this channel in the upcoming days and weeks, I don't even know how to process it all. But we have to first kick this thing off over at Our Gaming Leaks and Rumors, where you can see this campus rumor, which you might remember because we talked about this on prior videos, where it was claimed from a specific user that campus is an internal code name for a new application that you can find via data mining the Nintendo Switch firmware. And it does seem like this is going to not only check out, but also more or less reveal to us that we're going to have stuff like on-system communication with friends and things like that. So you have here, Family Boards Insider confirms the Switch 2 will have an application codenamed Campus. Family Boards user LIC, the same user who has been tracking shipment listings and is a known trusted source in the forum, confirms that the Campus rumor that originated back in January is in fact real. It's real. The person who was spreading it around had a lot of specific interpretations and other claims that may or may not be true, but the existence of an application with that codename, which is related to features for communicating and playing with friends, is real. Campus has nothing to do with social media or Miiverse type sharing features. And just to get you guys on the same page with the previous rumor from January, data mines of the current Switch OS and exclusive SDK leaks have confirmed that Nintendo Switch 2 will have a group chat and voice chat functionality codenamed Campus. This is what the C button may be for, unconfirmed, but I'm 99% certain. Groups will support up to 12 NSO subscribers. There will be screen sharing, nothing like Miiverse. Vidmeo isn't real, which was tying into another rumor that was spreading a while back. It's effectively a new application tied to groups, chat, screen sharing, but whether or not it's connected to the anticipated C button remains to be confirmed. So to LIC's point, who is definitely who you want to pay the most attention to with this information, they're not only confirming that this user that originally put it out there had it accurate and it is real, but just that their interpretations of how it's used and it being tied to the C button is really, not provable at this point. And so while it could be tied to the C button, and I've definitely had this mindset that the C button is going to open up some kind of new system level menu, essentially, whether that be for kind of like your, if you press the PS button on the PS5 and you have like literally all those options come up while you're in a game or not. You can connect with things like friends, you can play music, you can do a bunch of different like system level features. It's essentially a sub menu that pops up. I'm expecting the C button to more or less be tied to something like that, where you could hop into a chat room with your friends and create a new party chat. You could send direct messages to people on your friends list to tell them to get on the game or whatever the case is. And you might also have some options in there that says connect to your Switch 1 as a controller option, like we were talking about from the Ecstasis rumor. That may all check out, it may not, but Campus being an application that has an internal code name and being found in the data mine information, like this is real, and it does sound like this more social focused connection for your friends list will be a thing on Switch 2. And you know, if you need further proof, like the console literally has a microphone that you can make out from the first look trailer, and also we saw it in CAD renderings and all of these different accessory manufacturer leaks over the course of time. So Nintendo's putting an onboard microphone into their system. They're gonna have things like voice chat supported at the OS level now going forward. So very exciting things to be expected on that front, and we will probably learn about it tomorrow at the Direct. But now we have to talk about some of the worry that has popped up online around the Switch 2 from some new insider gaming reports that you can actually see on screen here, where it says developers say Nintendo Switch dev kits don't have 4K output. The Nintendo Switch 2 is set to get its full reveal on April 2nd, and there are plenty of rumors and speculation about what the latest console from Nintendo will feature. One such rumor is that Nintendo will support 4K resolution in some fashion. Past rumors suggest that the Switch 2 will support 4K when docked. When in handheld, however, it will have a 1080p resolution. Despite the claims of 4K support, however, there is some question to as whether that's accurate based on what was said during the game's developer conference in San Francisco earlier this month. I heard from one developer at GDC and also heard it separately in an email, but the dev kits or some of the dev kits don't have 4K output, Insider Gaming's Tom Henderson said during the latest episode of Insider Gaming Weekly. And then you have, further down the article here, will Nintendo Switch 2 support 4K? It should be emphasized that the lack of 4K output on a dev kit doesn't automatically mean the system won't support it. Console development kits don't often fully match the specs of the final system. For example, some dev kits could offer more memory to allow for better debugging and leave out features that don't impact testing too much, like in this instance, a 4K output. So it is not confirming that Nintendo's not doing 4K, and you're seeing some headlines and some takes that say this is proof that Nintendo's not doing 4K when docked. And we're not talking like native 4K in massive AAA games running on the Switch 2 in docked mode. Like, this thing is still a hybrid console at the end of the day. It is very limited by its form factor in terms of raw specs and power, but we do know to expect somewhere in the realm of a PS4 Pro when docked / Series S, with considering that it has things like DLSS at its disposal, a more modern architecture, and if you just raw GPU spec compared it might land closer to a base PS4, but you take that and throw DLSS at it and modern architecture for the GPU, and I don't think we're going to have to worry about Nintendo selling us a system potentially for the next 7-8 years. That's how long the Switch generation has lasted without a new piece of hardware, and not having 4K as an output option. I mean, they're just not going to bring a device to the market in 2025 that cannot actually output a 4K image to your TV. We know the HDMI port is actually capable of that. In fact, the Switch OLED dock, funnily enough, had HDMI 2.1, which does support 4K 60. So this is, I think 4K is a reality for the Switch 2, but there is some worry online just due to these developers talking at GDC and basically saying, hey, interestingly, my dev kit doesn't have a 4K output mode. And then this kind of talks, spreads online from there. But as it's noted, you wouldn't have to have the dev kit actually have 4K output for game development purposes. And the actual console that we get launched will presumably support 4K. At least that's where my mindset is. Of course, all this stuff, what's nice about it is we don't have to wait too much longer to get literally everything we're talking about here confirmed. Then you have this next story, which ties into essentially development kits and what's available out there. And there's actually a couple different stories we're going to highlight here. Kind of just the main parts of it. But John Linneman's Digital Foundry, many developers still don't have Switch 2 dev kits. And just to kind of go over his exact comments here. So we'll talk about GDC later, but based on a lot of things I've heard, it also seems like many developers are still without a kit. So they are very slow at rolling this out to a lot of developers. I think there will be third-party games early on, of course. It just seems like a lot of medium to small developers still do not have access to the development hardware. So Nintendo has been very selective with who they allow to do it. So this actually falls right in line with the previous report we talked about from Insider Gaming, suggesting Nintendo Switch 2 would have a 3-phase launch plan, and some of the third-party developers would get this basically development support later on, and their games would come out later on for the Switch 2. I'm not saying there won't be third-party games, but to further back this up, there's actually another source putting out there that Nintendo withheld Switch 2 dev kits from a big third party due to their chaotic nature. Nintendo just wasn't game, and this was coming to us, I believe, from Imran Khan, who, if you're familiar with, very reliable source, but essentially Embracer Group was the company that's likely named here as the one who's a little bit too chaotic for Nintendo's liking, because they just thought there might be a shutdown or something that would basically be now in risk of the dev kit just being out there in the wild, or not let's say in the most reliable, trustworthy hands. So Nintendo's being very selective with Switch 2 dev kits. While a lot of the console leaked out ahead of time, it does seem like they're just literally not giving it to bigger publishers and partners because they do not want leaks around this. And then that brings us back to that 3-phase launch plan that we talked about from Tom Henderson over Insider Gaming, where basically the long and short of this article is just that, according to the sources, the second stage will arrive. So the first phase would be first-party launch games. That's, obviously Nintendo's going to market their first-party games first and foremost before anything else. But then there would be a second stage that would arrive in October to November for third-party studios, many of whom are expecting dev kits for the Switch 2 to be sent in June. And this was a big claim because a lot of people thought the dev kits have probably already been sent out to all the major publishers. Not the case, though. I'm sure Nintendo, as I mentioned in the video when we first talked about this, has a list of preferred partners. Like, I'm expecting Microsoft, Xbox, and Team, how hyped they are about Switch 2. I think for sure they have the dev kits over there, and they're definitely pumping out plenty of content that will be at and around launch. But I think there's going to be some ones that are just missing and waiting on the sidelines to get their dev kits, and it does seem like June might actually be the time that they get them, which means, yeah, some of the third-party stuff, the ports that make a lot of sense and stuff we want to see hit the console, some of that may trickle down later on down the pipeline because, holiday season being cited here, maybe longer than that potentially, but, it is going to be interesting to see the level of third-party support now with all of these different sources kind of confirming the same thing, that Nintendo was just not, let's give a dev kit to whoever wants one that's a content partner for us. Like, that's not the mindset they had here with this one, and it's an interesting one. Now, shifting gears once again, we have some brand new renders because Nintendo released this Nintendo Today app. They're actually posting new stuff, surprisingly. Like, we got that image of the C button on their official render of the Switch 2, which was mysteriously missing from the trailer. Well, now they have just an official new collection of Switch 2 in different, form factors, let's say, or different, docked play, handheld play, and then Joy-Cons disconnected. But would you look at how the Joy-Cons are positioned, and literally in Nintendo's own official art at this point, or official renders for the console, they're just straight up showing that Joy-Con laid face down with the optical mouse sensor in mouse mode, essentially. So while Nintendo hasn't confirmed it, they definitely teased it in the first look trailer. We saw patents literally outlining exactly how that feature is used with the optical mouse sensor. So I don't know what further confirmation you need, but this is even more that, yeah, mouse controls are going to be a thing for Nintendo Switch 2. Then we're just going to briefly mention this because we may make a separate video on it down the line, but as of right now, just a highlight. As we approach the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct, we have some special info for you all. Pokémon Legends ZA is currently planned to be the final main series Pokémon game for Nintendo Switch. Gen 10, codenamed Gaia, will release next year exclusively for Nintendo Switch 2. This is kind of surprising news because you might remember, and I think they do actually kind of clarify, this is Central Leaks we're talking about here. They clarify that the Terra Leak contained info on a Switch 1 build of Gaia. However, this is inaccurate. Our current understanding is that Game Freak is developing the game as a Switch 2 exclusive. Of course, things can change if the console is a complete failure, but that's very unlikely. So that's actually kind of cool in my opinion, because while Game Freak typically likes to stick to the more established console whenever they're releasing a new generation, like even if the new hardware is out, they might still release it for the last gen hardware. It does seem like this is going to be a Switch 2 exclusive from the sounds of things, which means it should be able to utilize the power of the Switch 2 a lot better, and it's not just going to be like an upgraded Switch 2 edition of a Switch 1 developed game. So I'm hoping that this is accurate from Central Leaks, because yeah, this would be a game changer to have the next Gen 10 Pokemon in 2026 come out and hit the Nintendo Switch 2 family of systems, and literally you just have from the ground up the brand new generation of Pokemon developed with the more powerful Switch 2 in mind. I'm not expecting the graphics to look impressive. I never expect that from Pokemon games, but should be exciting for fans nonetheless. And you know, we're gonna have ZA as the big send-off game for the Switch, which I'm still, you know, planning on picking up. And graphical issues aside, that game, from a gameplay perspective, is right up my alley for Pokemon games. Legends games are like literally on another tier for me personally. But let me know in the comments down below what you make of all of the final blitz of Switch 2 information. Despite it being April 1st, this was not any kind of April Fool's video. Like, these are all legit sources. I'm filming it the day before. You know, we're obviously going to be talking about everything with the Switch 2 Direct tomorrow. I'll be live streaming that on the channel as another reminder. Feel free to come by and watch it with me if you guys prefer to do that. And then I'll be doing videos throughout the day, at least probably 2 if I had to guess, after the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct wraps up. So make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn your notification bell. And with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.